Thank you for the introduction, Asad. Hi, everyone. My name is Toukan, and I'm the co-founder and chief product officer of Ziina, MENA's first customer-centric financial platform, starting with a peer-to-peer wallet. In this talk, I'm going to be sharing best practices that you can use when putting together your MVP. Before I start, for those people in the audience who are building their first product, I'm really curious to hear how you're feeling about the process and about releasing your first product. Are you confident, excited, maybe feeling a bit nervous? Please drop a note in the comments and I'll make sure to read them later. An MVP, when correctly designed and executed, can shortcut the path to getting to the alluring product market fit. And from then, it becomes a matter of keeping up with your growth and scaling your company. For us at Ziina, our MVP was the catalyst for us to validate the market need, build momentum, grow our team, join Y Combinator, and close our seed round. For the founders and product managers listening, I want you to take these tools and use them to build a potent MVP. I think it's worth taking a moment for a refresher. Everyone here listening will likely know that MVP is an abbreviation for minimum viable product. What's the product you can build with minimal use of resources, time, money, social capital that can validate the market need? An MVP, if correctly designed, helps you test your assumptions and significantly de-risks an opportunity before you invest in it. So where do you start? You usually have a thesis about a pain point that you believe exists that's worth solving, or you have an interest in a specific industry that you'd like to focus on. Let's say, for instance, that you think there's an unfilled niche in scientific content for kids in Arabic, and you think building an online community with curated scientific content in Arabic will be a great business idea. The very first step you should take is put pen to paper and fill out a business model canvas. A business model canvas is a helpful framework you can use to quickly prototype a model. You detail information such as the value proposition, the customer segments you'd serve with this business idea, the channels that you'd use to reach this customer segment, your revenue streams, any partnerships required, and the costs you incur to operate this business model. I strongly encourage you to take a look at this framework. I've just breezed over it quickly. Again, for reference, it's called the Business Model Canvas. Using this tool, you can see any assumptions implicit in the business model you are proposing. You now need to take the riskiest assumptions you are making and turn those into hypotheses that you will test by running small experiments and, of course, by launching your MVP. You need to take any hypotheses from your proposed business model and conduct an activity that's called assumptions mapping. Plot two axes, one from unimportant to very important, and the other from have evidence to no evidence, and put each hypothesis in the appropriate place on the graph. The hypotheses that you need to focus on are the ones that are important. They are critical for your business to succeed, and the ones for which you have no evidence. These hypotheses need to be tested through small experiments and especially in your MVP. So the hypotheses that you've listed in your business model canvas can be categorized into one of three categories. Hypotheses on the business's desirability. If you build this, will customers want it? Hypotheses on the business's feasibility. Can you build this? Do you have access to the required resources? Does the technology exist? And the regulatory authorizations, if any. And lastly, hypotheses on the business viability. If you do this, is it going to be profitable? Will you generate more revenue than cost? You should test as many of the hypotheses you targeted in your assumptions mapping as you can in quick, low-cost experiments before committing to building an MVP. One key experiment you should run with your desirability hypotheses in hand is a need-finding interview with 5 to 7 individuals in your target customer segment to dig deep in the space and get preliminary validation on the idea that on the pinpoint that you're targeting. It's really important in these interviews to ask open questions, avoid leading questions, and understand the pain point as thoroughly as you can. I can't stress how key these interviews are. Follow up with why is that questions can be very helpful. Why is that? And again, why is that? It can really give you an insight that other players in the market may have missed. These interviews are a valuable source of information that can help refine the perceived pain point and the desirability hypotheses that you're going to test in more high fidelity with your MVP. They're also the first step in defining your user persona. Your user persona is a character who represents your target customer segment's pain points that you'll be trying to address through your MVP. Experiments that you can run to test other hypotheses are interviews with industry experts, browsing search forums, conducting search trend analyses to further explore desirability hypotheses, and of course, researching the competitive landscape. And then comes your MVP. So now we get to the MVP. You have in hand your key hypotheses, as well as the data that can help you build a more potent MVP that has a better chance of success. What you'll need to do next is put together a product requirements document, or PRD. The document lays out very clearly your goal, the scope of what you're building, what is out of scope, what you're not building, and is used to make sure that you and whoever is working with you, your co-founder, a design teammate, an engineering teammate, that you're on the same page. These documents can be put together really well, or they can be put together very poorly. For guides on putting together a highly effective PRD, I recommend checking out Lenny Rachitsky's newsletter and Shreyas Doshi's Twitter feed. They also share great product advice generally, and occasionally very interesting insider stories from Silicon Valley. Let's move on and cover 4 important considerations for when you're putting together your PRD and when you're building your MVP. Number 1, your MVP must be extremely limited in scope. Don't give in to the temptation to expand the feature set. Build a simple product that can be used to address a focused user pain point or need, and nothing more. The more time you spend adding things, the less time you're spending in the field interacting with your customers, and the harder it will be to interpret your results. At Ziina, we like Reid Hoffman's quote, "If you're not embarrassed by your first product, you're not launching fast enough." This definitely especially applies to the MVP. Don't worry about the bells and whistles, make it limited in scope, and get it out the door. Second factor is the time to build the MVP must be constrained. Instead of building it in a month, if instead of building it in a month, you can build it in 2 weeks, it means getting it in front of users sooner and getting that really key user feedback sooner. Instead of tinkering in your office, in your home, behind the scenes. Steve Blank likes to say, because product folks and engineering folks sometimes resist this temptation, but you need to get out of the building. You need to be speaking with your users. The third and final consideration for your MVP is that success metrics should be defined. For instance, you might say that this idea is worth pursuing if via the MVP, I get X paid subscribers in the first 2 weeks, growing at this rate. Or if I get Y many weekly active users. And just a quick plug, Mark Shahwan from Sarwa is going to be covering metrics in the upcoming Highway to 100 Unicorns talk. I recommend you check it out. So, launching your MVP. And now that you've built your MVP, keeping these 3 considerations in mind, you need to put your MVP in front of users and get feedback. This step is absolutely crucial. Don't be shy to be asking for feedback, and don't be apologetic about the product. The idea here is to be learning as much as you can about the user's needs and what it takes for your product to meet that need. This part of the process is iterative. You present the MVP, collect feedback, go back and make changes, rinse and repeat. There are some great frameworks to walk you through the iteration process. One great resource is The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. And the cycle that he describes is build, measure, learn. You've built your MVP, you'll measure the results, and with user interviews, you'll learn about the feedback, make changes to your MVP, release it again, and repeat the cycle. Eric, in his book, goes into detail about how to measure, what types of changes you should be making, whether they're small tweaks or big swings. I highly recommend it as a must-read for founders and product managers. Another great resource is Superhumans Product Market Fit Engine. They ask a key question. How disappointed would you be? And this is directed towards their users. So they'll ask their users, how disappointed would you be if our product was no longer available? And they take the individuals who gave a score between 8 and 10, which is highly disappointed, and they focus on those individuals and they ignore the rest. And they continue this cycle. They ask the question again, they further focus the user segment. It's a great framework, and if you're interested, you should check it out. Again, it's called Superhumans Product Market Fit Engine. Something really, really important I want to stress, and if you're going to take away anything from this talk today, please take this away. Do not get discouraged during the MVP cycle. Building an MVP and finding product market fit is one of the hardest things you'll have to do. It's not something that comes easily. For some of the biggest names in tech, it took them years to find product market fit. The narratives that you'll hear in the media often leave out the gritty details. I've later heard some of these inside stories, and they're a lot less glamorous than they appear. Ultimately, and this might be surprising, the founders and the product managers who win out are often the ones who just decide to keep on trekking, and not necessarily those with the best ideas or the best code or the ones who have raised the most. They are single-minded and devoted. They're just really stubborn about realizing their vision. Thanks everyone for listening to my talk. What I'd like for you to leave with is the key steps to putting together an MVP. I want you to feel empowered that you can build a potent MVP, and I'd like you to put the ideas I've shared in practice.
Thank you very much for sharing your insights, Sarah. I think there was some very useful stuff in there when you talked about the business model canvas, the assumptions mapping, PRD, and of course the note at the end about how you need to consistently be resilient when going about the MVP stage. And of course, there's a lot of embarrassment that goes with it, but I guess that is also a hallmark of being an entrepreneur. Unless you have the resilience, you won't be able to continue persisting. So awesome. Let's do this then. Let's jump into some of the questions that the audience have put across. Let's start with an interesting one over here. So would you say pre-MVP, what are some of the quick ways you can check for the feasibility of your idea?
Yeah, definitely. I would say that this will vary widely based on your idea. If you're building a financial services product like us, or if you're building a delivery startup or a wholesale or ordering startup, so this may come across as obvious, but you'll want to do research. This might sound intuitive, but you'll want to do research in terms of. I'm trying to gather my thoughts because I want to make this advice applicable across startups. So you'll want to make a list of the stakeholders and this is where the business canvas model will be very helpful. There's a section that talks about cost centers and the partners that you'll work with. So in our case, for example, Ziina works with payment processors. Immediately, the first step we'll do is to set up calls with card schemes and payment processors and get an understanding of the types of fees that they charge. If your business is entirely different, and let's say you're ordering, the model is that you're ordering items in bulk, and then you're selling discounted products through your app. The concept is where you get multiple people to bid together to buy things at a discount. What you'll want to do is reach out to wholesale suppliers on Alibaba. Tell them, I'm interested in, I'm exploring purchasing this. Can you give me an idea of pricing? So reach out to the suppliers that you'll need to use in order for your business model to operate. And in terms of pricing, there's an excellent book I would recommend. So pricing your product, you now have the costs related to your product. You want to figure out what's the revenue I'm going to generate. There is an excellent read on pricing that's called Monetizing Innovation. And they cover everything from A to Z in terms of pricing your product. What model do you want to use? Do you want to use a subscription model? Do you want to use a freemium model? And how do you decide which model is the best fit? What are the risks associated with each model? And they also even break down for you how to conduct user interviews so that you can determine, let's say that you've decided on a subscription model. Okay, I know I'm going to go for a subscription model, but how much exactly am I going to charge and how often am I going to charge? You'll conduct user interviews with your product and you can determine pricing. You can determine a preliminary pricing, I should say, based on the results of the user interview. And this is something that's, as Jeff Bezos likes to describe, it's a two-way door. So even if you put out your product and the pricing is off, you can then go back and change it. You know, it's not something that's set in stone.
That is pretty comprehensive on that front as well. So another one that comes to mind is, would you recommend any product communities that you might be a part of, both regionally or globally? And do you think the audience that are attending could join these communities?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I think being part of a community confers a lot of advantages. You learn from very motivated, talented individuals. Even just sharing stories is hugely motivating. So there's a number of communities you can join. The ones that you can join immediately are, so I've mentioned Lenny Rachitsky. I'm a huge fan of his newsletters. We take a lot of what he talks about and we put them into practice at Ziina. You can just sign up to use his newsletter, and as part of the subscription, you get access to his Slack community, and it's a great community. Another one is the Reforge program. So this program was started by some exceptional individuals, including Andrew Shen, who was leading growth at Uber. So it's actually a program you can pick courses in product, in growth, and then as part of that, you're part of the Reforge community. I believe there's also a Slack channel associated with it. Otherwise, you might want to consider joining an accelerator. And I know there's a number of strong accelerators. We got tremendous value from participating in Y Combinator in terms of course, in terms of validation, it helped us with fundraising, but also one of the biggest takeaways we got, which we were not expecting, is it was just highly motivating. It was so nice to hear other people's stories and to feel that, okay, what, the cycles that Ziina goes through are, they're very similar to other startups. It's just really motivating to be speaking with other founders and product managers.
Awesome. Another one that then ties nicely into this one would be, so you have these communities where people share their stories and you can also use it as a source of feedback for the product. I remember in your talk, you'd mentioned how you should set up need-finding interviews and reach out to industry leaders. So to what extent would you say that you can get constructive feedback on your MVP from these parties, including from the Slack channels, communities, or the other stakeholders?
So to understand the question correctly, we're not talking about user feedback. We're talking about feedback from stakeholders, industry experts.
Yeah.
I'm going to think that over for a second. Yeah, so you can get great feedback from, and the more you another positive thing about sharing with the community is that it gives you you feel more accountable when you're engaged with someone. You might tell them, okay, I'm going to set up another call with you and I'll have updates for you for our next call. So it pushes you forward, and often great feedback is shared. I think it's very likely that great feedback will be shared. Maybe there's something that you didn't consider. Maybe you assume something about your business model, and this industry expert will tell you, actually, oh, you don't need to do this, or here's a workaround, or I'm going to put you, it's also great for networking purposes, I'm going to put you in touch with this individual and they can help you with XYZ. I will take feedback on product with a grain of salt. It's not always correct. You should be the person who knows your users and their pain points best through constant interviews, surveys, demonstrations of the prototype, any analytics that you pull from your MVP. So while I would take into consideration feedback given by stakeholders who are relevant, so industry experts, for example, I wouldn't say that, yes, absolutely, what they say is, it's written in stone, because ultimately you're the one who knows your business model best and your user best.
Yeah, I agree. That's a very valid point, because there is a temptation to overcompensate when you reach out for feedback and then you try to incorporate way too much of it. And I think you run the risk of overdoing that and not staying true to the vision or the product that it is you're trying to offer. Okay, so we've discussed a little bit about the feedback from the customers and the stakeholders. So here's one more directed towards the team itself. How do you think you can ensure that the product team does not work in a silo of sorts when it comes to feedback?
So for this question, siloed, I'm going to assume siloed from the rest of the team. So from engineering, from marketing. Yeah, this is really a great question. And it's something that if not given attention is very likely to happen. So some of the things, some ideas are, it's very important to involve the rest of your team in the product development cycle from conception to launch. And this is what we do at Ziina. So we, first of all, we routinely source ideas from the rest of the team. Our engineering team have been a great source of ideas, our marketing team. And then we say, okay, we're going to conduct need finding interviews. We go and immediately we set up a meeting and we relay the results. We answer questions. We take any points we might not have considered. It's actually very important to be involving both engineering and marketing. And marketing is especially important when you're conducting user interviews around pricing, because they're the ones who are going to be selling your product. So keep them constantly updated. When the time comes when you've collected enough, you've gathered enough information, you've put together a PRD, you want to conduct a kickoff to get everyone excited, to hear ideas, to get all the team bought into the idea. Yeah, so these are some of the things that we like to do at Ziina. Some other ideas is you could consider including members of the engineering team in some user interviews just to make it feel more real to them, or including them sometimes in the customer support process, just to make it feel a bit more real.
Definitely. And I'm sure once the wider team comes into the frame when it comes to the product, you probably pick up on things, as you pointed out, that you wouldn't have seen. For instance, a product person might miss something a marketing person would see, or a operations person might have some level of hindsight that the other person would have missed. So it's good to have them come together as a cohesive unit. Just going back quickly to the point about need finding interviews, would you say that perhaps there are other ways to recruit test users for your product?
Yeah, recruiting test users, I think in the early days, it's so if your product is consumer facing, it's reaching out to your friends who are in the target segment, friends and family, and pulling them over and getting their time. In terms of reaching out to users, let's say that you're a B2B product, this is a little more tricky. There's a bit of selling involved. So it also, again, it depends on the size of, it really depends on the customer segment. So even within the B2B space, if we're talking about very small businesses, usually sending just a very thoughtful message and also personalized message goes a long way. And you'll find that, you know, businesses are willing to volunteer your time. You should also reach out to a high number of individuals, because many, of course, won't respond. In terms of reaching out to if your product is quite specialized and you need to target larger businesses, if you're at the very beginning when you're starting out, this can be challenging. So you might want to use your network. You might want to hop onto LinkedIn and see, okay, who do I know within this organization? Oh, I see I'm second degree connected. Perhaps this individual can introduce me. Yeah, what I've discovered is that when you're sincere and you're thoughtful in your communications, many times people are willing to connect you or to help out. And one last thing I should add is that you know, I really believe that you breathe your vision into existence. So if you believe it's going to happen, people around you are much more likely to believe that it's going to happen. So I am building this. This is what we're going to be doing. Just speak very confidently. And if you know, if you believe in the vision, it's much more likely you can accomplish it.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That was lovely in terms of the questions and the passion that you've brought and the insights that you've shared today. It's been an absolute pleasure to host you, and I'm sure the audience have taken away quite a few insights as well. And I'm sure some of them are probably going to reach out to you and bug you about MVP-related questions, as has been the case during our sessions.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Asad, for having me. It's been great to speak today.
Wonderful. And thank